Hey, I'm Pat. Welcome to Daily Devo. Today we're going to talk about keep, stop, start. Now, some of you know I grew up in rural western Montana. One of the things I loved to do as a boy was to go down to the creek that ran by our house and skip rocks or add to my rock collection. Yes, I had a rock collection. Didn't you? I remember finding some of those small stones that were so smooth. Eventually, I discovered it was the water that had slowly reformed these stones. It wasn't that the water had flowed over the stone once and taken off all its rough edges, but that every small drop of water over time, hour after hour, day after day, month after month, these little drops of water would flow over these stones and eventually completely reform the sharp-edged rocks to smooth nuggets that I could add to my rock collection. Now, there's a great life lesson here. You see, we seem to be obsessed with overnight success and turnaround stories. We seem to gravitate toward the ones who had everything change in one moment. However, these are seldom the real story. The actual story is that there's almost always a story behind the story, and the story behind the story is that the success or failure is nearly always the result of small thoughts, small decisions, and small actions that are done over and over and over. Even in our churches, we tend to be excited by the dramatic conversions and turnarounds, but generally true change is God slowly shaping and transforming us through the slow drips of prayer and worship and meditation and listening to His Spirit and reading His Word. The professional athlete didn't just wake up one morning and find success. No, the story behind the story is that he or she was grinding day after day after day. The craftsman didn't just wake up one day and suddenly have perfected their trade. No, the story behind the story is that they worked and reworked that trade day after day after day. The teacher, preacher, or professor didn't just wake up one morning with knowledge to pass along. No, the story behind the story is that they were reading and studying day after day after day. That's why I love this picture that you'll see on the screen. For those who are listening rather than watching, I will attempt to describe the picture. There's this dam built with books holding back a large lake, and below the dam of books, there's this chair and lamp. Here's why I love this picture. Because it illustrates that it's not one book or two books. It's a plethora of reading that will eventually make a difference. It's not one or two actions. It's the one you do over and over and over that will eventually make an impact. To me, the picture speaks to this idea of slow, dedicated, progressive growth or decline. Listen to how Jesus finishes His longest recorded message, Matthew chapter 7, verse 24 through 27. Jesus says, "Anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against that house, it won't collapse because it is built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teachings and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and the floods come and the winds beat against the house, it will collapse with a mighty crash." Jesus is saying, you better choose wisely what you build on. And by the way, building takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's one nail at a time. It's one piece of lumber at a time. But eventually you have a floor, then walls, then trusses, then a roof, and eventually a house. Starts with a thought, then an act, then a habit, and eventually a destiny. The fact is that you and I are building whether we realize it or not. And Jesus is reminding us that we better pay attention to what we are building, to what we are building on. So what are you building on? What are the small things that you're doing that are making a difference? 3 words for us. Keep, stop, start. Ask God's Spirit to speak truth to you. What do you need to keep doing? What do you need to stop doing? Or what do you need to start doing?